Welcome back to the Crypto is Key conversation. It's been a minute. It's been a minute since I've been on this video grind. Been having a lot going with the career and in school. I got a big test coming up on Thursday. I got to take three tests for my teacher credential stuff. So I've been getting it, man. Been grinding. But I wanted to come on here quickly and kind of touch some stuff. I see this update from CoinGecko. It's been a while since I've been on here. Bitcoin sitting at 42,281. Ethereum sitting at 2,176. XRP sitting at 60 cents. There's been a lot going on in the space, man. I've been keeping tabs on everything, making sure that I'm at least checking my formerly known as Twitter feed. But I mean, you have Elizabeth Warren and Chairman Gensler and their group of incumbents that are trying to stifle this innovation and take a stranglehold us and hold it back and create their own narrative. I mean, it's all happening. As you can see, we are banding together as a community. You had that group with the likes of Ripple and Brad Garlinghouse and Coinbase and Brian Armstrong talking about, as of now, $78 million have been accumulated to fight the good fight for lobbying and putting the right members within political and powerful positions to have a positive influence on this space. There's a lot happening. And look at this. Mr. Huber says, are you ready? This is XRP right here. We'll see what's up, man. Who knows what's going to happen? There's a lot of haters going out there. XRP is not decentralized. XRP is a scam. Big stuff happening with Steven Narioff and JD coming up here. I want to make sure that we played it. It should be starting actually right now. I wanted to make sure I came on here and we ended up watching that together. Let me go ahead and refresh this and make sure that it's not playing. That's why we're here. I'm excited to kind of see what's happening with this, and we're just going to actively watch this together here. What else can I want to touch on while this thing's loading up? Yeah, this Joe Lubin stuff is comical. Obviously, we know all about that stuff. A lot of people wondering why XRP isn't skyrocketing. Everything else is moving. This is kind of what happens. XRP's typically one of the last movers, but when it moves in an astronomical way, right? That's kind of how it happens. We've been hodling and accumulating this thing forever. I've been accumulating since late 2017. Not to say that I have some massive bag or anything, but the little bit that I've had, I've accumulated it. And obviously other digital assets as well, but this is one of my primary ones. Uh-oh, is it playing? We don't want to miss this here. Is it playing? What's up? Play?
On,
here we go. Showtime.
Crypto Twitter. He's an OG in this industry. His name is Steven Narioff. Let's bring him on. Known widely lately on Crypto Twitter. He's an OG in this industry. His name is Steven Narioff. Let's bring him on. All right. Widely lately on Crypto Twitter. He's an OG. Steven Narioff. Let's bring him on.
He's having some technical issues.
All right. If you're watching, if you have anything else on, you're going to have to eliminate that so we can just do this live, please.
I'm not, just the sound. Sorry.
All right. If you're watching, if you have anything else on, you're going to have to eliminate that so we can just. All right. This is live TV, everyone. As you can see, we're going to make sure that we can try to solve this first. I apologize. This is the first time this has happened. Steve, can you, as you can see, we're going to make sure that we can try to solve this first. I apologize. This is the first time this has happened. Steve, can you? All right. I'm communicating with my people. See if this is, I don't believe this
Steve is like, no.
Just making sure, Abby, let me know.
This is huge. Let's go.
Steve, can you hear me? You're on mute.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
I don't know.
I can hear you. Okay, there is no more echo. Are you there?
Okay.
All right. I apologize, everyone, for the technical issues. We are live. I have Steven Narioff, and I want to get to it right to the point. I called you an OG in this industry, and the reason I said that, Steve, is because I saw a post when you were recommending Bitcoin at 10 cents. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay. How long? Let me ask you a question. How long have you been in this industry?
So I started in the industry in 2010.
Okay. And how did you get involved in something called Ethereum? We're going to get to that real quick here.
I started in the industry in 2010.
Okay. And how did you get involved in
Yeah, I'm still having an echo. So what happened was I got a phone call that
He's doing bad right now.
Steve, can you
I got a
exit out
phone
of
call.
any other programs or pages you have, please? X out of everything except for this, or maybe even go on your phone if you have to.
It's all right.
All right, what we're going
That'd
to
be
do
me, though, for
is
real.
if we're going to see if we can solve this problem in the next couple minutes.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, go ahead. We're good.
All right. Again, apologize. Listen, I believe you were involved in Ethereum, but we're back, or we already lost time. So what I'm going to do right now is that your position with Ethereum and your involvement has been subject to debate. And I want you to watch this video, and then I'm going to ask you to follow it up. Let's play the Vitalik Lorishin interview, please.
On a related note, I wanted to ask also about Steven Narioff, a technologist and lawyer who helped Ethereum with its crowd sale. He was charged with extortion of a company that was trying to hold an ICO in late 2017. And between this and Virgil, I wonder, do you feel Ethereum in general needs to do a better job of vetting the people who become involved with the foundation or other core members of the project?
Steven is definitely a separate case. Like Ethereum before about 2015, like there's definitely, this founding team, and the founding team had like a lot of characters that today I definitely don't approve of, and at the time I had no idea how to even like tell apart good people from bad people, and pretty much everyone seemed reasonable to me, and so like at the time I definitely didn't have the ability to kind of detect the problems in someone like Steven Narioff, and I think since then the Ethereum Foundation has gotten much better. Since then, like a lot of the kind of characters that caused us a lot of damage at the beginning, we've successfully distanced ourselves from.
Now, Steven, I'm going to play something else in a second, but what I want you to know is that in addition to that clip where he said that he's only had spoken with you a few times, his father basically intimated that he barely knew you. But before I get your reaction, I want to play one other clip where you were sitting next to Vitalik, and you even described your relationship that I let it speak for itself. Let's play the roommate clip.
Vitalik, it's been a little about 5 years since we all came together, and you did some pretty great things that I think everybody knows about, and our relationship was amazing. We were roommates, would you say? And some interest.
Okay, now all I know is that if someone's up there saying our relationship's amazing and describe it as roommates, that implies that there was a little more contact than just a few conversations. So why don't you clear that up in your own words?
Yeah, I mean, so I originally got involved in Ethereum because they wanted to have this crowd sale, and everybody told them that this is an illegal sale of securities. And so, it was my task to figure out, is there a way to kind of thread the needle with the current securities laws to make it legal? Specifically as to Vitalik, my house kind of became Ethereum, USA. And so he would stay here for, it was over a year period of time. He would come here, and then I also rented an office for Ethereum, which I paid for out of my own funds and was not reimbursed for and didn't ask for reimbursement. And so he would work out of that office, and he would stay with me sometimes several weeks at a time. It was on and off. But, Joe Lubin was in New York also, so he came down here pretty frequently.
All right. And I want people to know that I did some research to make sure that you're not just making these claims for the first time. So I want to play an old clip involving Max Kaiser, of all people. Let's play that.
So, Steven, tell us a little bit about your background.
So I was very fortunate that been in Bitcoin in the early days, and then I got a call from Charles Hoskinson in 2013, and they said they need some help working on the legal structure for what ended up becoming Ethereum. And so I worked on that, and that turned out fairly well. A lot of folks were involved in that one, but my role was very much in creating what was a legal structure for the utility token.
And we're going to talk about that. Now, you said something interesting. All right, so you were held out as an architect of the ICO, or someone. I believe in your words, you said that you came up with the concept of utility token. I can't play everything, but on Crypto Law's video library, long before you reached out to me or I reached out to you, I had clips of you talking about your relationship with Joe Grunfest, and he was acting as a liaison. Is all that true?
Yeah, actually, it's documented in Camilla Russo's The Infinite Machine, which is kind of the definitive book on Ethereum. And so what happened was, I asked we were trying to figure out how is this not a security, this new token thing, right? And there'd only been like 3 token sales, and they didn't really do anything on the legal side. And I said to him, we were just grasping with the concept of fuel. And I said, wait, you need this to send this, right? And he said, yeah. And I'm like, so everybody who's even going to get Ether in the crowd sale is at some point going to have to send it out, and they're going to have to use Ether to do that. And he said, yeah. So I'm like, and it's used for decentralized applications, dApps. And he said, yes, that's in computing and all. And then so I said, well, wait a minute, it's kind of like a stamp. And I mean, it's a much more detailed analysis than this. But basically what I said is, well, this kind of like sounds like, gas you put in your car or something, that it's a good and it has a function. And I called it a functional token at first. And then that became a utility token. That was like kind of step one. Okay. Now, we had to figure out, and I contacted Joe Grunfest. Right, exactly. So Joe Grunfest is probably the most respected SEC commissioner in the last 50 to 100 years. And I was lucky to talk to him. He's a professor at Stanford. And I called him, and frankly, I thought he was going to say that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. And I said to him, I gave him the whole spiel about, maybe this digital, token actually can be viewed as a good. And he said, that's brilliant. And he thought, and so we really kind of talked it through. And so I had this amazing resource. And then we contacted the law firm, and we gave them, the pitch together. And they said, yeah, that makes sense. You guys came up with a whole new innovation narrative.
Okay.
The next. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and I told you before we went on air that there's so much material here. I got to streamline it. Maybe we'll do another show, in the new year or something to follow up. But you said something interesting where you rented out an office. And I know that when you been posting things online, you even put up your own money. So I want to bring up what you sent us, the $10,000 check, please. And what was that for? Because that is a check made out by you to do what?
Yeah, so that's the law firm that I found to help us to get an opinion letter that the Ether is more likely than not a security, right? Okay. And so they didn't have the analysis of how to do it, but the irony is here we are in 2023, the law firm didn't trust anybody on the entire team other than me. So I had to give a personal guarantee for all the legal fees. And that was like the retainer amount. And there was, hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. I mean, the Ethereum ended up paying for it, but I was on the hook for all of it.
Okay. Let's bring up number 5, the Prior Cashman. Is that the law firm you're talking about?
Yes.
And what are we looking at?
So this is on the left-hand side. What you're looking at is the front page of the opinion letter that we got, that it's more likely than not a security. Okay. On the right-hand side, it says opinion party certificate, which this is a shorter document. The left-hand one is 20-something pages, and the right-hand one is like 5 or 6 pages. And in these 5 or 6 pages of the opinion party certificate, there are certain requirements that Ethereum is attesting to the law firm, and in order for the opinion to be valid.
Okay.
And so Vitalik signed that, and one of those was not held up to be valid.
All right. Do you know which one are you talking about?
Yeah, so they were. It's interesting because it's been talked about recently. It was skewed. It was all the pre-mine was the majority of the because unlike Bitcoin, it was a pre-mine, and so what they agreed to do was 60 million ether. They agreed to, over a period of 3 years and 4 months, issue 60 million, the same number of ether, to the miners, so it would be balanced. Effectively, what they were saying is, we're not decentralized, and in order to become decentralized, we need to balance it out with the miners. The problem with that analysis is, if you go out 3 years and 4 months, they issued less than half of that, which means the opinion letter is no good, and it's probably a security.
All right, let me ask you, there was a famous video where Joe Lubin says before the ICO, he had a note in his pocket. Is that the prior Cashman? Is that the note?
That's the note. Yeah, so I mean, that, and basically that note was my analysis, and then they researched it to make sure that it worked, because I had to take the utility token and also figure out how to sell it, and that became the ICO. Right. And that's what I noticed.
Clearly, when you say there were conditions, in other words, as a lawyer, and you're a lawyer, someone comes to me or you and says, we want an analysis. Is this an unregistered securities offering? And a lawyer says, if these assumptions are made or these conditions are made, then it is more likely than not. And if any of these are not met or satisfied, then my opinion is that it is. Is that basically what you're getting at?
That's correct. And so some of those they were saying these are statements that are correct as of today. And some of them, like distributing 60 million ether over 3 years and 4 months, are something that they were promising to do in order for the opinion to be valid. Okay.
Now, I want to play show number 6, please. And this was an article, and no one's going to be able to read it. I just want people to know the source, the Financial Post, where Joe Lubin was quoted as saying that there was a period of time where he feared that he was going to be tackled by the FBI at the tarmac at JFK. Chet Ritt, a co-founder, said at one point, we thought we would all end up in jail. So is that when you were brought in because of all that fear?
Well, I mean, I started, actually, the project started kind of at the end of December, and Joe and I both started in January. So we started right at the beginning. But there was always an understanding that this is a very dangerous area, and could have criminal implications. And so, frankly, most of the team didn't really seem to care. They didn't understand the fact that, they say, I live in Canada. They didn't understand the fact of the long arm statute and all of that. So my job was to figure out how to sell these tokens that are not Bitcoin, these new tokens, and keep all of these guys, the team, out of prison, basically.
What I want to do is play number 7, the clip of Stephen before a long time ago.
But he said to me, the problem is our lawyers are telling us this is an illegal securities offering, which in fact it was. So I was charged with trying to figure out a very simple thing: raise money and not go to prison.
Okay. So the reason I play that is you were out there before this falling out, or what I call distancing of Steven Nayeroff from the ETH founders. you were out there with Max Kaiser doing all these seminars, speaking about your involvement in ETH pretty candidly. Do you have any explanation as to why we're going to get to your arrest? Because as you know, there's no free pass here on crypto law, and I'm going to ask you those kind of questions as well. But any reason that you have that you kind of getting thrown under the bus is like, hey, we don't really know this guy. He minimized your role at ETH. And, you know, I'm an objective guy, Steve. I don't know the answer. Is the answer that because you got arrested, they feel compelled, or is there more to it?
No, I mean, it's so they started in 2016 where they deleted my ethereum.org email, which cut me off from all of the data that was in there. And then it went into earnest when the Ethereum Foundation sent an official letter from an article that I was quoted in that I said it was my personal opinion, and one of the Ethereum co-founders were in too, and said that I was never in any way, including as an advisor, ever associated with the Ethereum Foundation. And so and it's kind of interesting because that happened around May of 2017, and another event happened around May of 2017, and that's when Bill Hinman got to the SEC. So from there on out, there was no issues. I mean, if anybody listened to that NFT, you know that of everybody in that entire organization, Vitalik turned to me, and I spent months putting that plan together. It was a 3-hour talk, but I spent like 3 months putting that together. He trusted me the most. I knew the most about the organization. And then this turnabout of events was kind of befuddling to me. I didn't understand it at the time. I do today.
Okay, well, let me ask you something. So everybody knows, we're not going to play it. We got too much to get through during this interview, but you put an NFT out, which was a telephone call with Vitalik that you're talking about. I listened to, I can't say I listened to all of it, Steve, but I listened to a lot of it. And, you know, I have to tell you, I'm an objective guy. I don't have anything against anybody. And I want the facts. I own Ethereum. I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I've exposed the conflicts of interest of him and all them, despite owning more ETH than I did XRP. I just want transparency in this industry, because we don't become legitimate until we have it. But I got to tell you, when I listened to that, I kind of, you know, Vitalik seemed like over his head to me. You know, he didn't seem like a criminal to me. I'm just being fair and objective or anything like that. He seemed like a young kid, maybe a math genius and all of that, but he really seemed over his head. And I didn't know what your take on it was, since you had so much dealings with him.
Yeah, I mean, so he didn't have that. When I tried to explain to him, I said, look, being, a human calculator does not mean you're an entrepreneur, right? So you're an entrepreneur, you have to have experience. You have to put in your time. And there's common sense and, all kinds of other aspects to it. And so there was no adult supervision there, right? And I thought Joe would be the adult supervision. He needed adult supervision, so that didn't work out. And the problem that I told him is, I said, all of your incentive is designed specifically for Ether to go up in price. None of the incentives of anybody of the co-founders or anybody in the foundation was to actually make the Ethereum protocol work. And now look, 8 years later, we don't have a single killer dApp, but the price of Ether has gone up, right? And everything is geared towards that.
Well, and by the way, I just want to make sure I say this. Vitalik, like I said, I was just being fair to Vitalik. When he made his comment about XRP lost its protection under the law, I chastised him. I said it was immature. But again, I'm being fair. He just seemed like a young kid to me. Joe Lubin's invited on this show. Vitalik, everyone will be treated with fair and with respect and civility. But I will ask tough questions like I'm about to ask you. But you mentioned the price of ETH, so I got to take it that you did pretty well with ETH.
Me?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you had to be part of the ICO and the pre-mine.
I did this. I did this really as a gift because I saw what this was as a gift to humanity. I didn't. I did not accept any of my ETH.
Were
I
you offered?
I all of the expenses that I paid out of my pocket, which was in the six figures, I did not get reimbursed because I did not want any kind of conflicts. And I also was going to invest in the ICO and chose not to at the last minute because I didn't want there to be any appearance of a conflict of interest.
All right, let's show exhibit number 8, the email related to. I know people may not be able to read that, but this is all going to be available. It's basically an email from you, Mr. Nayeroff, saying whatever ETH that they were going to give you to give to somebody else. Is that right?
Yeah, and I basically say, I was really here to help the cause, and I wasn't expecting anything in return, and I donated my time, and so that's really what that was.
Now, some people would say, well, now you've got an axe to grind and all of that. So I am going to talk about credibility, because some people basically, because you were arrested, they're going to maybe discount what you have to say. And so I told you, if you come on Crypto Law, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to show the indictment, and I'm going to talk about what the government claimed. And so that's basically what we're, I started a label, Steve. It's called Brass Knuckle Books, and I'm always prepared, as you see right here, right? So listen, what I want to do is, you were indicted by the government and arrested by the FBI for basically extortion. And we're going to talk about that. So no free passes. I want to pull up exhibit 9, and then I'm going to bring on your attorney, but to also ask questions. This is basically the indictment and complaint again of the United States of America versus Steve Nayeroff and Michael Halady. And it portrays you, Mr. Nayeroff, as a bad guy. And it portrays you as a greedy extortionist. And we're going to talk about that. But first, let's have your attorney join the party. Michael, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Welcome to the show. Real quick, just explain to the audience who you are.
Okay. Michael Scotto. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I I've been an attorney for over 30 years, spent the first 23 years in the Manhattan DA's office. I left there as the chief of the Rackets Bureau. I met Steve sometime in 2021. In early 2022, he asked me to come on board and take a look at his case. His case had been pending for a couple of years. And, right off the bat, I realized that there were some real issues with the case, Unfortunately, people see an indictment and particularly if the federal government brought it, and they just assume that, the person must be guilty. Like you said, a pretty bad guy. Right
here, let me just make sure the audience knows. So that indictment that I put up was that Mr. Nayeroff conspired to obstruct, delay, and affect commerce. Now, interesting, the government, when they're prosecuting someone like Steve, calls it commodities, because they actually said the effect of commodities in commerce by extortion, virtual currency, by either actual or threatened violence. That's the charges. Now, there are 2 people that were charged, Michael Halady, Steve Nayeroff. Who was Halady?
Now, the interesting thing, okay, so Halady is cast as Steve's, co-conspirator, as co-defendant. Steve was introduced to this gentleman in December of 2017, basically, by a dear friend who said, "Oh, this is the guy I'm going to marry. He's a retired federal agent, and I think he can help you out." Ironically, vetting people. So Steve, brought him on board. Steve didn't know anything about his background other than what his friend had told him, and he took the friend's recommendation very highly. Turns out, Steve found out about a year later that Halady was actually a gentleman by the name of Michael Peters, who 6 weeks before this dear friend of Steve had introduced Steve to him, had been released from state prison in Massachusetts. He was a career con man. And so, at that point in November of 2018, Steve actually ceased all contact with this individual and reported the con. Halady took him for about $800,000 or close to $1 million in various cons that he was running, investment cons, also services. And he actually, Steve reported it to the FBI agent who ultimately arrested him. The other interesting thing about Halady is that when, I started looking at the case with Steve when I came on, I found that Halady had this extensive unexplained contact with the same FBI agent who had arrested Steve, the one that Steve had reported Halady to. Over 100 text messages and 45 phone calls, which the government said we weren't entitled first to even know if they existed, right? And this is the gentleman that they had cast as a co-conspirator, Steve. That's Michael Halady.
Well, let me, listen, I'm a former federal prosecutor, and I know that I'm savvy enough to know that there's always two sides to a story. I don't just read the government's case and then assume the person's criminal. I believe in presumption of innocence until proven guilty. But how come, when we were going to do this show, I reached out to you, Mike, and I said, hey, I'm a former federal prosecutor. I want to see Mr. Nayoff's arrest report.
Right.
How come you haven't sent it to me?
And you know what, John? I would love to send you the arrest report. It's the government didn't give it to us, right? So that's the irony is they gave us Halady's phone records. They gave us one of the alleged victims' phone records. They gave us Halady's arrest report, but Steve's arrest report, which we asked for, they said we weren't entitled to it. And again, what's interesting there is Steve, recounts the story of his arrest, that they dragged him into a van and they
I'm going to get that from Steve because I want to hear it. But I'm just telling you, as a former criminal defense attorney, former federal prosecutor, I've never heard where the criminal defendant is not entitled to the arrest record and the arrest report. It's the first thing you get in discovery.
Right. And again, we were very surprised. And when they put their response in to our motion to dismiss and our motion to compel, they said, well, if the case goes any further, at that point, they'd made the decision, after we revealed everything that had gone on and the misconduct and the fabricating of evidence, to basically cut their losses and move. They opposed our motion to dismiss, but they moved to dismiss. And then they said, well, really, it's kind of moot.
All right. Back to you now, Steve. It's almost like reading a novel when I read this for the first time. Can you just, for those that don't know, because not everyone that's watching this and that will watch it can you describe the circumstances of your arrest?
So, it was about 5-something in the morning. And it was about a dozen agents busted in through my door with guns blazing, some, I don't know, but I was in my bedroom, and they all came into my bedroom and kind of surrounded me with their guns out. I said, "What are you here for?" And so they wouldn't answer me. And this was the agent that I'm talking about. That's actually running this whole thing. Is the agent that I reported Halady to as a con artist, right? And he would never speak to me about it. So then. They did a few things. Number one, a number of the agents, because there was somebody else in the house, went through my entire house and searched the entire house. And there was no search warrant. Number two, that agent, Jordan Anderson, took my phone and put it up to my face, and I went like this, so it wouldn't open up. And he said, "Well, tell me what the code is," and I just said no. And so they made me sit there for quite a while. Then, fast forward to the van scene. All the other agents left except for Jordan Anderson and one other agent. And there was a white van right in front of my home, and they put me in the van. And this is not like one of those cushy vans with TVs or anything. It was like a van with like a metal floor, and they just had me sitting on the floor handcuffed. And so he gets out his book, and he's like looking at it, and he says, as if he knows what the sentence is going to be, and he said, "You're not going to see your kids grow up, you're going to be going away for decades, so you better cooperate." And then he said here, and he gives me this clipboard with like I don't know how many pages, maybe 50 pages or so. And he said, we want information on them and anybody else you have. And I still haven't been speaking, right? And I'm just taking this all in, right? And so I start looking at this list, and I'm like, wait a minute, like I know a lot of these people. These are like, really OGs and titans in the industry and people that I know to be, honest. And I'm looking at this, I'm thinking to myself, this feels like a witch hunt, right? And so, he said, let's start. There was somebody named David, right? He said, let's start with David. Tell me about David. And I was like, and he said, well, if you don't know anything, like, where does he go on vacation? Who's his girlfriend? Where does he trade crypto? And so then I just looked at him, and I said, I don't know. The only thing I could say was, did anybody read me my Miranda rights? Because I really wanted him to stop, harassing me. I wasn't going to answer. The other agent in the van did not appear to understand what was transpiring, right? And he kind of looked at me with like a sorry look. It wasn't a bad cop, good cop thing, right? He was just like kind of lost. And, that could be really the reason why the arrest report didn't come my way, because it would have to be truthful.
Okay. Now, I've already asked a couple people that some of those names, and I'm not going to highlight all the names, but there's a couple names that interest me because I have connections with them. One is a client of mine that I represented in the library case. You said that Naomi Brockwell's name was on that list of OG crypto people.
Right. So, I mean, I was flipping through the pages, and, it's a little bit of a hectic scene, obviously. And so after, when I came back home, what I could remember, just the people that I could remember was mostly people I knew, I was acquaintances with, I was friends with, and that I saw on there. And, I was later to find out that, like, not everybody on that list necessarily, they were targeting. Some of them, they wanted information, then they were working with them. And they wanted information on those. But it would seem to be totally indiscriminate. Naomi is like a reporter. I've known her for a long time. She's a good friend. And, so that stuck in my mind. And that's, seeing a name like hers, or a Caitlin Long, who I've also known, for many, many years, and is a good friend, that I know are absolutely as gold standard, above the board, honest people that you could get to. And if they're going after these people, then there's it's a pure witch hunt.
Well, so to make sure I understand, they basically say, do you have information on these people? And there's a whole slew of names. Was there ever a time where they suggested that if you gave information, like sometimes, I've seen it, unfortunately, where someone says, tell us what you know. And if you don't know, you better make something up. I mean, is it any kind of that scenario?
Yeah, well, they said, this was with the prosecutor, and he specifically told my attorney, and I told my attorney he is not allowed to even negotiate with them. I did not want them to even think that there was a possibility that I would cooperate in any way. And he told him, what we expect from Stephen is literally, quote, dozens of convictions of high level people in the crypto industry. And when they spoke about it, he said, well, what kind of information you want? He said, anything on anybody. It was kind of like, and this is where, again, he said, well, he doesn't have any I told my attorneys, I said, I don't have any information on any criminals. Right. And so I'm sure how, what they're looking for. And they said, they don't really care. They just want anything you can come up with that you can. And yeah, it was basically, they were telling me, if you can come up with something and fabricate something, or if it's something that was not even essential, to where do they spend their time? That kind of thing.
Mike, what kind of prison time these charges bring if convicted?
I mean, likely 10 years, right? I mean, these are serious charges. And you know, the fact is, Steve was able to, you know, reveal that the government and these alleged victims had fabricated the whole thing, you know, through our motion. But he was facing, you know, 10 years.
All right, let's pull up Exhibit 10, which is the declaration by Mike. Basically, this is a declaration where you say that the information that you've learned, Mike, leads you to believe that in all likelihood, Halady was an FBI informant.
Yeah.
And what was the purposes of that filing?
Well, you know, we wanted to lay everything out because if he's an informant, there can't be a conspiracy. But of course, if Steve is innocent, which we proved because we had video evidence, there can't be a conspiracy either, which may be the reason why, although Halady pled guilty, he hasn't been sentenced yet. And then people say, well, you know, he must be guilty. He pled guilty. The problem with that is Halady, while he was out on this case, you know, was caught committing another series of frauds against people because he's a con man. And so basically the government rolled that into this case and also never charged him with, again, ripping Steve off for close to $1 million. So, you know, Halady would have pled guilty to anything. You know, he would have pled guilty to being the second gunman on the grassy knoll to get the deal that he got. But that's why we brought it out, to show that he was not a co-conspirator. He was the government's agent. And again, there's this unexplained contact between Halady and the same agent that arrested Steve. 100 text messages, 45 calls, and the government again said first they couldn't even confirm or deny that they existed, and then they told us that we're not entitled to know about those.
Right, and I'm going to have to move it on quickly because we got to other things. But I had asked you to give me something that that you believed showed one of the many claims of evidence that you have on Steve's innocence. And one of the things that you all provided, we'll play number 11, which is the Storm X call.
I'm excited to build something beautiful with you guys. So thank you so much for supporting us. And I'm really looking forward to the future. So thank you.
This is what you guys said, right? You wanted 1.4 billion tokens plus the 30,000 worth of ETH, which is 808 million. I'm saying we're going to give you more since we already wrote it down. 2.25 billion tokens. So I don't know why you're arguing because you're getting more.
I'm sorry, Ari. I'm still in my first cup of coffee.
Okay, so I'm assuming that person was who Steve allegedly extorted.
Yeah, that was the extortion, right? If Steve didn't have the video of that, they would have testified at trial that during that Skype that Steve had extorted them, when basically they're offering him more than he asked for, and he's shocked because, you know, he's looking to get what he's entitled to, but they're offering him even more than they asked for, and that's one of the instances in which the government said that Steve had extorted them.
Okay, and so like I said, we could spend forever on this, but let's go to number 12, which is the government's motion to dismiss. And the only thing I'm highlighting here is that basically the government is saying that they're unable to prove the charges. And they also talk about exculpatory evidence was discovered. Is that like the recording we just heard?
Well, it's the recording, but it's also the stuff that, well, that's what they claim, right? But we know that they had 7 months before they arrested Steve, they had messages, text messages, messages on Skype. They had emails where everything was appropriate, above board. There was no extortion, right? So you know, they say that they didn't have this exculpatory evidence, that it came into their possession later on, but the fact is they had much of it 7 months before. And we don't know, by the way, whether or not they had the videotapes, because they did search Steve's apartment, although they didn't have a search warrant. And by the way, they did seize that iPhone, although they didn't have a search warrant. They gave it back to us, you know, a couple of weeks after the case was dismissed. We inquired, but meanwhile, when we asked for it, you know, silence.
Right. We can't spend too much more time, but because I got to get to more stuff. I told you this is like a 3-hour episode. Steve, you've made comments on social media that in multi-agency cooperation, you said the SEC is implicated in your arrest. I want to show Exhibit 13, where this is a discovery request, and the Department of Justice basically says that employees and agents of the U.S. Securities Exchange Commission were not part of the prosecution team, which rebuts what you're claiming, right? You're claiming that the SEC is involved, and they're like, hey, they're not part of the prosecution team. So I understand that you did something smart next, and you sent a FOIA request to the SEC, and here it is. And even though they weren't part of the prosecution team, they say they got 14 gigabytes of data on you, 112 boxes of records. And we're talking, just so people know, if it's a banker's box, then it fits 2,500 pages per box. I know that just from my civil litigation practice. And 112 boxes would equal 280,000 8x11 pages of documents and evidence. And so I know the DOJ said that the SEC is not involved, but the SEC has. Why does the SEC have 14 gigabytes and 280,000 pages of documents on you, Steve? Were you ever investigated by the SEC? Were you part of an enforcement action? Why so much data on you?
I have no idea. I mean, there is no explanation, and what they said was, well, in 3 years we'll consider your request, and then it was basically they denied it. So we are filing suit to compel them to give it, and under the Privacy Act, they're not allowed to get personally identifiable information about me from the DOJ. But what we've pieced together, and it's beyond the scope of this right now, but we pieced together, they not only, I wouldn't say they were just part of the prosecution team, they were directing the entire prosecution from the SEC. It's the same group, Hinman, Berger, these, Valerie, and they placed somebody in the Eastern District of New York where I was getting prosecuted from the SEC. They were really calling the shots. It was very clear.
All right. I got 15 minutes. We had that technical problems at first. Let's speed through this because the last category of this interview is what has been titled ETHgate. I'm an ETH owner. Listen, I'm not out to hurt ETH, for the record. I believe the SEC is granted a futures ETF. BlackRock has asked for a spot ETF of ETH. No one's out to hurt ETH, but transparency is paramount, and where the facts take us and where the facts take us. I want to play number 15 to set the tone.
I said, I'm going to keep an open mind. I don't care what they pay me. I don't care if they pay me. I want to maximize learning. I want to travel. And thank you, Ethereum Foundation, for giving me the opportunity to do that. It was very eye-opening. But after a year, 18 months, I was like, holy shit, like, what am I really doing here? I'm really pumping Joe Lubin's backs. All due respect to Joe Lubin and all the other, Ethereum whales.
That is Peter McCormick's What Bitcoin Did. I should have gave credit to Laura Shin's Unchained earlier when I played that. But now I want to bring up number 16 because this is something known in the community, certainly in the XRP community. We're not going to play that right now, but that's the disguised whales clip. But Steve, I have to ask you this. I've had people in the XRP community ask me if you're a double agent of the federal government, and are you?
No.
Okay.
I'm not an agent of anybody. I mean, somebody actually said to me that they heard I was an agent of Joe Lubin, which is like, I don't even know how they got to that one. I am not an agent. I've never cooperated. I risked, many, many years refusing to cooperate with 3.5-year battle. My attorney can come on and he can attest to that. And furthermore, I'm filing a lawsuit. And if I was an agent of the government, I would not be allowed to file that lawsuit. So no, I'm not an agent of anybody. I've never cooperated, and I will never cooperate.
Right. Okay. And so the bottom line, when you say you're suing the government, you intend to file a Federal Tort Claims Act for unlawful arrest, wrongful, malicious prosecution, things of that nature. Okay. I had to get that out there. We were talking about, ETH and what's been labeled as ETHgate. I want to show Preston Byrne. This has been an issue that has been dealing with ETH its entire time. This is Preston Byrne, outstanding attorney. He did a blog where he concluded, based on on-chain data, that it looked like one or two entities was getting all the ETH from the ICO. And we know that Gary Gensler claimed that Joe Lubin got 10% of the ETH. And some people have argued more, and we're going to talk more about that. But any thoughts on it, Steve? Because you were there in the beginning. Any thoughts on it?
I set it all up, and I wasn't involved in the actual. When the Bitcoin, you had to buy it with Bitcoin. The Bitcoin was coming in. There was a Bitcoin address that, according to the recording that Vitalik had, it seems like Joe and Vitalik had access to that Bitcoin address. So this disguised whales thing, Lane Reddick in that interview also said that he had heard that one or two people had bought up almost all of the entire ICO. I'm going on the record as saying, and Preston Byrne is basically saying the same thing. I'm going on the record as saying, two parties, maybe it was three parties that bought the vast majority of all the ETH. Those parties were also the same ones that were mining the vast majority of the ETH all the way until the merge of proof of stake. So they were just increasing in other words, contrary to what Hinman said, is they started out not decentralized and they became less decentralized over time because of the miners were the ETH holders to begin with.
All right, let me cut you off there for time. Joe Lubin's not here to defend himself, but I'll do it for him. So just to be fair, I'll play a video of what he's made public. So
let's say the merge does go through. For the sake of this conversation, let's say the merge does go through. Supply distribution of Ethereum will be especially important for Ethereum as a proof of stake protocol. And this is mainly because capital is what directly influences who can participate in building blocks, in proposing transactions, in creating network consensus. There is a video of the US SEC Chair Gary Gensler saying that, Joe, you owned 10% of total ETH supply at Genesis. My question to you, given that we're going to be moving on now to proof of stake and where supply decentralization of Ethereum is so important, can you tell us how much ETH you and Consensus still control on Ethereum?
No, I wouldn't disclose that personally, but it's never been even close to 0.5%.
Okay. Do you believe, Joe?
No,
I have no position. I'm just asking you.
No, and if you notice the words that he said, it's never been close to 0.5%. I have the list of how much the contributors, people who worked on the project, and for that amount, yeah, he's actually telling the truth. He got less than 0.5%, right? But if you own 40%, that's also not close to 0.5%. Right, so it's you got to be careful about the words he's using. He didn't say it was never more than 0.5%. It was never close to 0.5%. No, I don't believe it at all. I believe.
Right, let's talk about someone else's opinion. Giving credit to Peter McCormick of What Bitcoin Did podcast. Let's play Lane Reddick, number 19.
What I am suggesting is that we're not revealing conflicts of interest, and we should be doing that. We should have way more transparency than we have.
Because we pretty much know who every Bitcoin Core dev is funded by. Like, gets announced, like, I don't know, Coinbase is sponsoring these two people.
Human Rights Foundation.
Human Rights are doing these projects. Sure. Gemini's doing them. Sure. It's pretty out there.
Sure. This is not really the case in Ethereum. There's little to no transparency around who these folks are in the first place, or like how they're funded, basically.
What's Joe Lubin's role in all this? He's the guy. Look, I'm not asking for any kind of accusations, but he's the guy I'm interested in because it feels like it's his project.
Joe,
it feels like Vitalik is the tech director and he's the CEO. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah. So what I know is that He was involved not from the very, very, very beginning, but shortly thereafter, which is to say, kind of like post white paper, pre Genesis. He invested. He was personally paying, I think, probably for a lot of the expenses for the team during the initial process. Because folks like Gavin Wood and Vitalik, probably didn't bring much to the team economically.
He had a lot of Bitcoin as well.
He probably had a lot of Bitcoin. Yeah, he had a background working in finance, et cetera. And he probably almost definitely invested very heavily into the pre-sale, right? So he's definitely a large Ethereum holder. We know that he I shouldn't say we know. My understanding, based on secondhand information, is that he kind of single-handedly funded Consensus's operations for the first few years, and Consensus built some pretty cool shit. So that's probably good for the network.
Built some cool shit for Saudi government.
Is that true? I didn't know that. Oh yeah, there was some partnership. Yeah. Well, look, Consensus got really big really quick and was doing a lot of things in a lot of places. Yeah. I'm not super surprised.
And then it went out to raise a lot of money at one point.
Yeah, and I heard there was a big investment recently by JP Morgan or something. I don't know the details about that stuff.
Interesting.
Look, I think Joe's an interesting figure. I think Consensus is an interesting organization. I think from a governance perspective, it's interesting because it is a second pole in influence to the Ethereum Foundation.
All right. Now, listen, I'm a capitalist, Steve. If someone puts all their risk and all their money in funding operations, they certainly should be allowed to benefit from it. But I'm just saying as a concept. But my issue is this transparency, especially when it involves government actors, like Bill Hinman, Jay Clayton, Gary Gensler, and whatnot. And so transparency is very important. In fact, we learned just recently something that you released yesterday, that transparency versus non-transparency is something that was debated in the day. So let's play what you released. Credit to you yesterday, the number 20.
And again, as we've discussed, there's a tension between running an open, transparent organization and protecting ourselves. And so maybe we agree to be open and transparent, except for everything from 90 days ago and past, because it's all gone. It's sort of like the way cryptocurrencies work. You can, there isn't a trail if you don't want there to be.
There isn't a trail if you don't want there to be. And the reason why I'm demanding transparency is because everybody thinks that the fight's almost over. The fight with the government, with Elizabeth Warren and the anti-crypto army, are just beginning. And this lack of transparency is going to be an Achilles heel to this industry. And so any insight on that? You released that. Do you have more than that?
I have a lot more than that. There was a lot of recordings that I had. I was getting very concerned because they were saying things like this, and I was trying to give them advice. And so it's kind of, I never expected this, but I wanted to cover myself. So yeah, I did do some recordings. At the time, Joe. It doesn't even make sense because, you cover your trail. What he said was that you can, disguise well, you could split it up into a ton of smaller wallets. And when you look on chain, that's actually exactly what happened. And it got split off into a ton of wallets. I believe he's a significant, much more than Gary Gensler is saying. And it's concentrated amongst a couple people. And it's gotten even more concentrated. What I will say is, go back to the beginning, that the mining clause from the opinion certificate that Vitalik's signature is on, according to that, they needed to issue 60 million Ether within 3 years and 4 months. And Hinman's speech was like 3 years, it's about 3 years. They had issued about less than half of that. And the reason they were supposed to issue it was to decentralize themselves. So the Vitalik and Joe are going out and saying they're decentralized when their own documentation is saying they didn't do what they were supposed to do to decentralize.
Right. And the last couple of minutes, my focus, again, is always on these government actors. So I want to bring up Exhibit 21. And just so people know, this is the Hinman deposition testimony in the Ripple case. You see there, that's my own writing there where I say not true. And that's the part of the testimony where Hinman said that he never spoke to anyone other than the SEC before he gave his speech. And we know from the Hinman emails that he met with Lubin, he met with Vitalik on June 8th. He called it the Ether speech. We know that he violated the code of conduct and all those types of things. But you and Boring Sleuth are out there, Mr. Nayarov, making some claims, like fraud, the greatest fraud ever, and things like that. And how are you going to prove that? Because that's where people are going to come with you. You can make a claim, but can you prove it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, their own documentation is showing that they're not decentralized, and they were going around, and that was at the time of the Hinman speech. Second, yeah, Boring Sleuth has been absolutely, and there's a team behind him that has been absolutely amazing in terms of finding this on-chain data and connecting the wallets and showing that they're groups of wallets. I'm going to drop a bombshell right now, and I'm going to make a statement, and it's what we discovered as we kind of tripped into this. But the famous DAO hack, which Bill Hinman was the first thing that he did when he got there, he wrote the DAO report to kind of cover over the whole DAO incident. That DAO hack was an inside job by members of the Ethereum Foundation. And whoever was controlling the Bitcoin wallet from the ICO is directly implicated, but it had to involve quite a number of people. And so there was no DAO hack. That was a complete inside job, and they benefited from it in a whole host of different ways.
Can you, again, this is news to me. Can you prove this like through on-chain kind of analysis instead of just subjective, circumstantial evidence?
That's not my opinion. I mean, that's the beauty of blockchain. I mean, it's not my opinion. You can look at the wallets. You can see, I'll give you one example. One of the wallets that's connected to, I'm not going to make any individual accusations on this first show, right? But one of the wallets that's connected to a certain individual actually communicated with the hacker's wallet, 10 days before. And another one of the individuals at the Ethereum Foundation, set up the contract for the hack and set up, the wallets. So, that's like, none of that makes any sense. There's a lot more. I mean, I'm just giving you some anecdotal stuff that absolutely doesn't make any sense. So, there's a ton more than that.
All right. Well, listen, we are out of time. Obviously, we're going to keep up with you. Maybe we do a second part. We get into analytical data on chain. It's outside my expertise. If I did do that, I would bring people on who are objective, independent, who could verify these on chain analysis. Steve Nayarov,
run it, JD.
For your time.
I'm putting information constantly. Mostly on Twitter, which is now X, and my Twitter handle is just my name, @Stephen Narayoff, and so you can see a lot of information there. And thank you, John, for bringing me on.
Thanks, Steve. Now, listen, all I can tell you is this fight is starting to heat up. Elizabeth Warren's bill that she just proposed that bans Bitcoin, that bans crypto in the United States, trying to apply AML and KYC laws to validating nodes, her introduction of pushing for a central bank digital currency, which I guarantee you her version of a central bank digital currency won't be the version you and I like. This war is just starting. And so we've got to clean up all of this nonsense that has taken back in the past. And these government actors who have participated, hopefully you'll be truly exposed and held accountable. Listen, this is the last show of the year. I want to thank everyone out there. We're going to come back in the new year. I love all of you. Thank you so much for following. Everybody be safe. Have a happy holiday. Have a happy new year. God bless you. And I guarantee you we're going to win.
Hey, let's go. So, man, as you could see, I think that was an understatement when he said things are heating up, man. This is literally a volcano at max capacity, getting ready to erupt. This is crazy. I'm interested to see kind of how things progress. Obviously, you can take what you want out of this this interview and run with it. But obviously, we've been validated. We continue to be validated based on things that the community has brought to light and surfaced. And I'm curious to see what the Boring Sleuth and Stephen Arioff, how they keep surfacing, and hopefully they do start up another conversation, bring in some other objective analysts in. Man, obviously, if all this stuff's on chain, how come no one's really bringing it up outside of the sleuths that we have in the community? What's up with all those other entities out there that actually, you know, I guess put out their snakes on the, you know, the blockchain and looking at all the transaction stuff? Like, why isn't anyone stepping up? Maybe I'm just not seeing it. But yeah, there obviously that was an hour and 5 minutes of content there. Shout out JD. Make sure if you haven't subscribed to his Crypto Law TV, show some love. I don't know why it took me so long to like it. I was watching on my phone as well, so I liked it on there earlier. But yeah, man, it's good. It's good to be back. Let me make sure I get this over here. Let's bring this over here. Yeah, make sure you come to Crypto's Key Conversation YouTube channel, subscribe, follow us on Twitter or X at Crypto's Key 1. I really appreciate your support out there, you guys, and I'm excited to finally get back in here and start making some videos. I got my test Thursday, so after that, I'm going to put out a video, maybe a couple videos before Christmas comes. But make sure you guys stay strong out there and be safe.